name is Katya Min, and I'm the Curator of Public Programs here at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, and it's a real privilege to have you here with us. Before I turn the mic over to the curator, who's going to be leading us through a really interesting series of rotating conversations with the participating artists of Take This Hammer, Art and Media Activism from the Bay Area, I would like to do a rundown of all the things that she's been working on and properly introduce her. And she'll also be facilitating with Rebeka Rodriguez, our manager of civic engagement. I wanted to, just read this. Christian Frock is an independent curator, writer, and educator. Frock's practice focuses on art and politics. Invisible Venue, the curatorial enterprise Frock founded and has directed since 2005, collaborates with artists to present art in public spaces. She has organized programs, exhibitions, and commissions with many organizations, including the British Arts Council, Headland Center for the Arts, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, Southern Exposure, SOMART's Cultural Center, and Emergency USA, Thorough Center for Sustainability. Her writing has been featured in The Guardian US, KQ The Arts, and the San Francisco Chronicle, among others. And as you know, many of you may know, Chronicle Books published her first book, Unexpected Art, in March 2015. And she recently co-curated Public Works Artists Interventions from 1970s. Now it's actually closed, but and she's also the scholar in residence at California College of the Arts Center for Art and Public Life. So that's a very long list, but we're thrilled that Christian was able to work with amazing artists to bring us this great exhibition. And I'm gonna just turn the mic over to her so she can introduce our special guests, the artists who are in the show. And also, so just the one.
Can you hear me okay? This is a very good-looking group. Thank you for coming out tonight, everybody. I'm here tonight with 13 of my collaborating artists, some of whom might be arriving in a few minutes, as you can see. But in the front, we have Erin McElroy, Adrienne Skye Roberts, Elizabeth Travelslight, Indira Allegra, Jeremy Mende, and Wesley Grubbs. Persia in the red beret, back amongst everyone else. Oh, Julio Salgado behind him. Oree Originol. Oh, Vane Hain. What are you guys doing back there? So I want to mention tonight's conversational format is borrowed from a program developed by Alexander Rose for the Long Now Foundation. I've never even actually seen it. I've just heard about it. And I loved the way it sounded, so I wanted to try to do it here without ever having done it before or seeing it. So I'm going to take you on another grand experiment with me. The artists have all agreed to try this out with me. My friend Rebeka Rodriguez here, the civic engagement manager here at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, is going to keep time for us with a bell that I brought from home. And so tonight for the conversation, we're going to have rotating conversations. The artists are actually going to be in conversation with each other. I did not script their interactions because that would be really controlling and strange for a show like this. And more relaxed. And then we'll hopefully have some time at the end where you can mill around and talk to the artists directly. Basically what I asked them to do was to think about 5 themes in relation to Take This Hammer. So thinking about movement, how people become organized and involved in movement building and coalition building. I asked them to think about engagement. I thought I could read this from there, but I cannot. Engagement, what do you think is possible? What are the possibilities through civic engagement? Meaning, how is the work meaningful to you, personally? One-on-one, I've had many conversations with all of the artists who have incredible answers for these things. Impact, what kind of impact do you hope to have with the work? And possibility. What would you do if you could do anything? Which I love asking artists and then trying to figure out how to make that happen. So it's going to start out with myself and Erin McElroy, my friend. Come on up. It's just us and 100 other people being recorded for the internet. So it's cool. It's just us here. Yeah, it's just me and you. And we're being timed. So just like we always are in conversation. Rebeka is going to get the timer going. And then at about 9 minutes, Rebeka will, so you'll hold the timer up so that we can kind of have a sense of how much time we've occupied. This is not the time to rebel, artists, by the way, in terms of the timing, okay? You've been told. So, rebel everywhere else but here. So, Rebeka is going to hold up a timer for us to give us a sense, and at 9 minutes, she'll give us a little ding so that we know that we should wrap up. And then after this, Erin will be in conversation with Elizabeth Travelslight.
Oh, great.
And it will cascade on from there. Okay. Erin.
Hey.
It's so good to see you.
You too. Here we are.
Just me and you here with
just like we're
microphones.
at that bar we talked at.
Yeah. Except there's microphones and we're being recorded and we're in front of an audience, but it's totally the same otherwise. Mm-hmm. So, Erin, I want you to talk a little bit about how you got involved with developing Anti-Eviction Mapping Project, which is here. I also want you to know, gentle viewers, that you're welcome to get up and wander around the show if you feel like you need to move. You can wander around the show and eavesdrop on us at the same time. So Erin's work is here. You work with many other people. Can you talk a little bit about how many people are involved? It's a rotating group maybe, or has it been a steady group of people the whole time?
Yeah, it's rotating. So I work with the Anti-Eviction Mapping Project, which is a data visualization, data analysis, and oral history telling collective. We've been around since 2013. I co-founded it with 3 other friends, one of them still involved in the project, Jennifer Fieber. But it's grown tremendously since then, and there are, I don't know how many people are involved because people come and go, and it's a volunteer-run project. We have no staff. Sometimes 15 people might show up to a meeting, sometimes 2 people. We have 3 groups of people working on the project. We have folks doing oral history work in Alameda County, in Oakland, Fremont, and the city of Alameda. We have folks doing oral history work in San Francisco, and then we have people working on data viz on both sides of the bay. So we have sort of 3 groups or types of meetings that we engage in. So
how often do you guys get together?
We have 6 meetings a month, and then a lot of other informal one-on-one meetings, or if people are working on a particular project, they'll meet on their own time in different places. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to go back a little bit further and talk, and I already know this story well, so I'm asking you a question I already know the answer to, but I want you to talk a little bit about how you got involved in coding. I know, you think it's weird that I love this story. I love this story.
Well,
Tell them.
I don't consider myself a great coder. I learn as I go. And my story is kind of funny. I did my undergrad in Massachusetts, and I studied photography and painting. I got out before, in 2004, before there were sites like WordPress and whatnot to create personal artist websites on. So I had no money and spent a lot of time in a local Barnes & Noble bookstore reading really silly books on, HTML. So I don't know. I don't know that my skills have developed that much since then. I think a little bit, but there are a lot of people who get involved in the project who are much better developers and
So you're reading
than
things
me.
like Dummies
I was
Guide
reading
to Coding?
Yeah, this was in 2005,
Dummies Guide to HTML?
2006.
Is that a book?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
There are different editions. Every year there's a new edition, and now you can read all that stuff online, but that was, over 10 years ago.
I know,
so.
because there's no bookstores. There's so
no
few bookstores now
yeah.
to stand around.
And those
it.
weren't great bookstores then, but, but it was what I had access to.
So can you talk about what the impetus was for organizing the Anti-Eviction Mapping Project and how the initial group of people sort of decided to do something?
Yeah, so it really began as an idea in 2012 when a lot of different people that I was in community with were facing eviction. it was around the same time that a group of us got together and also started a group called Eviction Free San Francisco, which emerged in 2013 as a direct action group to provide a mutual aid model to help people fight displacement and keep people in their homes and hold speculators and landlords accountable. But we wanted really just to see where the evictions were so we could figure out how to engage in direct action campaigns. So the mapping project began as an idea really just to make one map. It was our first Ellis Activiction map, which kind of put us on the map. But then after mapping all the Ellis Activictions in San Francisco from 1997 onwards, we realized there were so many other things that we could do, including research around these LLCs and these big sort of corporate entities responsible for a lot of displacements, but also there's so many other ways that people get displaced, and there are so many stories that a simple dot on a map can't tell. So the project really evolved to keep on doing more than we had been able to do thus far, and it's still growing. We're doing a lot of work right now, like I said, in Alameda County. I just finally got all of Oakland's rent board data after struggling for a year to get that. So yeah, there's a lot that we haven't done yet.
So you're moving towards the East Bay, and is that a kind of a wave that you're following?
Well, it's funny. We actually were working in the East Bay largely from the beginning, but we had a really hard time getting Oakland's data because Oakland's rent board has been really difficult to work with. There is this wave that people talk about, of course, of displaced San Franciscans ending up in Oakland, contributing to cycles of gentrification there. But there's so many other stories too, and it's actually a lot more complex than that. If you actually look at this huge wave of displacement in Oakland, it was during the foreclosure crisis that I think the most people actually were displaced from their homes. So the story is actually complex, and we're trying to figure out the best way to tell that story. And I think there are a lot of models we can learn from what we've done in San Francisco, but also Oakland and Fremont and the city of Alameda are unique places and also require their own methodologies and approaches. So.
I'm in San Leandro. Will you also come to San Leandro?
Next year.
It's the only town that's actively courting gentrification that I can see. Like they're like, come to us, come gentrify us.
Oh.
Yeah,
Well,
we're getting
yeah.
our Burning Man, our first Burning Man sculpture this
That's
summer.
not a good
Our first.
sign.
I mean, I don't know if there's more to come, or it's a 55-foot tall piece, a sister to the one that was at Treasure Island.
Oh.
So it'll fit right in.
Is your mayor friends with Libby Schaff?
I assume they must be.
They must
yeah.
be friends. Yeah.
Maybe they burn together.
They probably do.
Yeah, I don't know. So, Erin, can you talk about, and I imagine you've had many meaningful conversations with people or exchanges with people about the work that you do. Can you tell us one or two stories of really times when the work has been made really meaningful to you?
Sure. So I think when we can actually research one of these very evasive LLCs and put a name to it, and if that can actually help a tenant engage in direct action to stay in their homes, I find that meaningful. Probably a lot of people have seen the story of Benito Santiago, a good friend of mine, but he was being evicted by Pineapple Boy LLC, and we didn't know who that was. So our research was able to show that it was actually this guy who was a co-founder of Vanguard Realty, which is one of the biggest real estate companies in the Mission, and he's a serial evictor. This was one of, I think this was his 5th building that he was evicting. But because we could figure out who he was and what these different weak points were, we could actually go inside Vanguard and engage in direct action. And the 4th time we did a sit-down in Vanguard, the real estate agents actually kind of violently pushed us out, and I think they were so scared after that we would sue them that they withdrew the eviction. So it was a combination of direct action and research that I think led to Benito and the other folks on his street, on DuBose Street, being able to stay in their home. And then we were able to get the Community Land Trust to come in and buy that. So now it's effectively off the market. So that's sort of an ultimate victory, I suppose. Yeah.
And you talk about direct action in combination with the work online. They're intrinsically connected, right, for you?
Yeah. We only began the project because we wanted it to be that.
To be direct action.
To be able to fuel direct action movements and to help provide organizers and activists and tenants fighting to stay in their homes with different tools so that they could do so.
We have a great video that Ben Leon has produced for Yerba Buena with you. Real quick, like 2-minute video talking about you beginning your first sort of experience with direct action. Can you talk a little bit about that as a preview to our 1-minute video?
Yeah.
Don't talk too long.
Well, it was very. I wasn't expecting to. Oh, maybe I don't have to.
Last call.
Am I
This is a
done?
working experiment, by the way. When I stand up, I'm going to reposition the chairs. Okay, tell me about the direct action.
Oh, I wasn't going to talk about this here, but he asked what my first experience with direct action was, and I was involved in tree sitting over 10 years ago in Northern California, and that was where I learned certain direct action tactics and skills, and it was a really problematic and flawed movement, but I learned how to problematize it and also learned how to engage in different direct actions where you actually put your body on the line to prevent something bigger than you from literally bulldozing through. So I think that was useful, and I also learned that it was a very white male movement at the time and became very critical of that. So, yeah.
Great, thank you so much, Erin. I'm going to invite Elizabeth Travelslight up now, and I'm going to reposition the chairs.
Okay.
You can stay in the chair you're in, but I'm just so aware of like sitting with my back. Sorry, I don't want you to think I'm moving the chair up.
No.
Is that better? Sides? Is that better?
Hi.
Hi, Erin.
Hi, Elizabeth. Good to be in a seated situation with you.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
So I was wondering, well, I've engaged with you a couple times now in collaborative art pieces, and the first time was with the show that Dorothy Santos curated, which was a show that happened on both sides of the bay that you were very pivotal and also organizing, that was looking at intersections of surveillance and displacement. And I feel like that sort of intersection is something that this entire show also looks at. And it's something that I think we need to, as a community, also get better at connecting, right? As these big tech companies are also connected to speculative real estate apparatuses and issues of privacy, blah, blah, blah. But I just want to hear you talk about the evolution of that collaboration with Dorothy, and then also how that you see that feeding this show.
Sure, okay. So the Bay Area Society for Art and Activism is an organization that it emerged out of the summer of 2013. I don't know if that was, I think we could, there's no way to romanticize it really. It was ugly, but that was really kind of when the clarity of the situation in San Francisco and in the Bay Area really kind of became unignorable. And I had an infant daughter. She was like 4 or 5 months old by like September of 2013. And I'm a San Franciscan native. I was born in Daly City and I grew up in San Francisco. And I really wanted my daughter to have the experience of growing up in San Francisco because it's a special place, and as I've grown, like I really value that experience, and I wanted her to have that. And by the summer of 2013, it sort of seemed like, I mean, it's a given that she's going to have a slightly different experience than me growing up in San Francisco, but what was emerging was not the experience I really wanted for her. And so the Bay Area Society for Art and Activism was kind of just this effort to cultivate art and activism as a regional value, because I sort of felt this like onslaught of like newcomers who want to be San Franciscan but don't know what that means, and I have my own strong opinion about what that means, and I felt like art and activism was really central to that. And so wanting to provide artists with opportunities and resources to share art and activist work, right? Because it intersects with the commercial art market in various ways, especially for different artists. And so I felt like a fiscally sponsored nonprofit, Some Arts Cultural Center is our fiscal sponsor, and just fundraise and redistribute that money so that people doing the kind of work that you do didn't have to feel so, or just had, even nominal amounts of income. So the Dissidents and the Dissidents, the Displaced, and the Outliers was an exhibition curated by Dorothy Santos, and it came to me in the sense that, in that fall of 2013, I don't know if anyone else has had this experience where you want to look something up on the internet, right? So you use, everyone's favorite search engine, and suddenly I got this really spooky feeling that every time I looked something up on Google, every time I looked at my family's photos on Facebook, that quiet metadata collection was slowly displacing me from my home. The economic model and the profit making from that was making my housing situation not just my housing situation, but the housing situation for those in my community increasingly precarious. And when the news of the Yanez Lopez family eviction came, that was really the turning point for me. And so I had this kind of looming sense that the metadata collection and my livelihood and my home were connected, but I didn't have a framework or any kind of theory or philosophy. It was just this spooky feeling. I couldn't have even articulated it as well as this at that point. And I didn't know Dorothy that well, but I was kind of, as a sort of just newly hatched organization, I was like, we need to plan something. We need to, as we go tell people about our organization, we should have something in the works. And I kind of handed it off to Dorothy, and I was like, housing security and digital privacy, go. I don't understand it, but she seemed to have a particularly unique set of skills around that. And I think that, and then strategically wanting to, my mother and father immigrated to the United States and came to San Francisco, and they worked in the biotech community, which is kind of this, great uncle to the social media, web-based tech community. So I don't necessarily, want to feel so alienated from people who are moving to this region, for a livelihood. But the policies are fucked up, right? The housing situation isn't okay. Sorry, I just swore into the microphone. I didn't mean that just happened.
It's okay.
Okay, thanks. It's just Erin isn't, yeah. And so, we collaborated with the Electronic Frontier Foundation as kind of a regional activist organization, right, that has its own relationship to the tech community, and wanting to, open up this conversation in that way with, newcomers to the city, as well as, this incredibly rich, established community of artists and activists. Did that?
Yeah,
That was
thank you.
a really long answer to what was probably a simple question.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful, and I think it also relates to the different art that's in this gallery right now.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder, do you think there's a way that alternative technologies or non-corporate technologies can actually shift the ways that we engage in technology and actually become something? Because I think that there's so many people that position the anti-eviction movement as anti-tech, but then there are actually cool and interesting technologies that aren't invasive and aren't responsible for displacement, but they get so marginalized. I just wonder about the future.
Well, so, right, I feel like I love technology. My father is a software engineer. My stepfather was an electrical engineer. It's not, okay, I'm just gonna say, it's not technology that's the problem, right? It's capitalism. There, I said it.
You said it.
And and so I think it's what are the economies that are going to support the development of new kinds of technology, and how can the tech community reconcile its its income business strategy with something that's ultimately self-defeating. There, I said that too.
You said that. That's great.
I mean, right? Like it's again, like it's not that it's, and for the larger corporations, I think they've really, they've picked their model, and I don't know how nimble. If I was going to pick a technology model, right, I would pick something that was open source and really challenged kind of the economic system for how we share those ideas.
Of course. I have 1 minute, is that right? Okay. So what's next for Bay Area Society for Art and Activism?
Yeah, we had this we had, just because we have the support of an incredible group of artists and activists, had this really amazing first breakout year that I just, all of a sudden after the year, I was just like, oh my God, now what? I don't know where to go from there, because it already had far exceeded what I had imagined was possible. And I feel like I would like the organization to have a slightly quieter year. And this is maybe part of my subtle critique of capitalism. I don't want to feel compelled to go, because it's just not going to be sustainable for me. And so I think I'm trying to think critically about the nonprofit model and how that works with a sustainable lifestyle, because I really want to believe that our longevity is probably one of the great things that we can do just to continue to exist and to be, and it's so easy to feel exhausted and just kind of move on, and I don't want to do that. So we're just going to keep being. That's our goal.
Keep being.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Erin.
Yeah.
That was nice.
Thanks, Erin. Thank you so much. Thank you for putting up with this experiment, you guys. Leslie Dreyer coming up next to speak with Elizabeth. Yeah, you have your hard questions for her?
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Miss you.
I had this really funny idea, especially when the chairs were turned towards each other. We would really we would just go Marina Abramovich on everyone and just sit.
It's an experiment, right?
I don't know. I would probably just start sobbing for no apparent reason. But I do actually. I was really welcoming this opportunity because I don't know. I feel like the summer of 2013 was kind of just a pivotal time of year in your practice. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the summer of 2013?
Wow, the summer of 2013 was, devastating. I think a lot of people were starting to realize what was happening with evictions on a greater scale. You couldn't go to a house party without hearing everyone talk about losing their home or having friends lose their home. And then I was reading Gentrification of the Mind at that time, which didn't really help things. But there was a chapter in there that was called the Gentrification of Gay Politics, which resonated. At the same time I was reading that chapter, the Pride rescinded the nomination of Chelsea Manning. So it was oh, yes, the gentrification of Pride is like the gentrification of San Francisco in every city. So I talked to some friends, Zeph, Fishlin, Erin, lots of other queer radicals in the city, and asked if they wanted to do something in the Pride Parade. At first we were we'll put a giant pink tank in there talking about homo-nationalism and whatnot. But it ended up being Google Bus, because we were the symbol of gentrification in the city that everyone can actually see, that's tangible throughout the Bay, is the Google Bus. So yeah, we rented from the same company, and I registered as queer techies for open source technology, and asked to be placed next to the tech contingent so that we would fit right in. And they placed us between Google and Twitter and Dropbox and amongst all of them. it was interesting. So we had a giant banner that said, "Gentrification and eviction technologies, get out. Get out with pride, yay." So the first eviction map by Brian Whitty had come out around the same time or a little before. So we blew that up really big and dragged it behind the Google bus.
And you dressed up as little
the Google location marker
pointers.
pins. Yeah, so that was hard because it's like a celebratory event, and then everyone's like, "Oh, yay! Oh, that's some serious business." But tons of people, really liked it, and a lot of people visited the site, which had a bunch of information and resources. And that's sort of where it began, with all of us getting back together in December and blocking them. Yeah.
I have like two directions. This is a difficult question, but I think it's maybe one that might be useful to everyone listening. How does your work fit into contemporary notions of art?
Oh no.
Because also I'll buy you some time here for a second, because right I feel like that's just an open and ongoing question in your practice.
I hate that question.
Okay, do you want me to ask you a different one?
I mean, I can try. Go to the next one.
Okay.
Pass.
Okay. Okay. I feel like the work that you do is incredibly demanding, in the sense that, interventions are not simple things, and putting yourself, your work, community members, sort of in public space in these strategic, inconvenient ways, it's hard. And I'm wondering where your fortitude and your passion come from.
Well, it's really hard. It gets harder, too, now that things are just harder. It's like, it's 2016 now, and things are way harder than 2013, so I'm really tired.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to do, I got evicted in September, so yeah, it's, and there's nowhere else to go if you get kicked out.
Was there a moment, like, I guess maybe if we go, when did it start for you, this kind of activist approach to?
2011, February 2011, I got involved with an anti-austerity movement that popped up, US Uncut, terrible name, but it followed after UK Uncut was like against the budget cuts. So we were doing direct actions, doing flash mobs in banks when flash mobs weren't overtaken by corporations. Going after Apple and Google for tax dodging, because we lose $100 billion a year from corporate tax dodging. So we were tying all of the budget cuts in education and healthcare and everything, housing, to this corporate tax dodge. Yes, there's military and all of where taxes really go is a problem. So it started with that, a group of strangers organized on the evil Facebook, and 80 people that didn't know each other shut down Bank of America, which was super rad. So that was really inspiring, of like, wow, we can just do this. It's easy. So I designed these checks that we use that talked about the $4 billion they were dodging and all of the programs that could be saved. And everyone went up and clogged the teller lines and tried to cash their fake check just to stall and effectively shut it down. So then that simple design, I could pass it out to the chapters that were across the U.S. And then people were using it to stall banks and shut them down temporarily in lots of cities, which was great and really easy. And then Occupy came up, I guess, 9 months later or something, and everything sort of bled into that. And I think it's a space to build community and imagine what's possible when things are so hard. So I try to go about thinking through these things of like, this is where we can come together and imagine our collective power and what we could do, and try to get it to catch on so more people do that, so we can actually make some big waves. You know? Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm going to take that question you passed on, and I'm going to scramble it.
Pass.
Let me see if I can come back to it in this way. So, we had this panel discussion, the Bay Area Society for Art Activism had a panel discussion, and something that the art critic Ben Davis said really stuck with me, and I feel like it has, like, your perspective is kind of maybe an interesting way to think about it. Ben said the question isn't how art can change the world, right? It's how we change the world to change art. And I'm wondering what you think of that.
How we change the world to change art? I just don't know. I mean, my definition of art is just way beyond what is traditional art, I think.
Tell us more.
Yeah, like simple gestures. This question is just, I feel like this question like takes us away from real poignant things, because we're like just trying to label everything, and that's where we're not able to like open up our minds, you know. So everything's fit in a box, and it's just all way more complicated than that. Thank you. No, we have a minute left.
Okay. I was just going to hug her for 1 minute. Oh, that's our 1 minute? Well, we are in an art museum.
Yeah, I mean, I want it to open up more than what is, to stop having these fights so much of like, is this art? Is it activism? It's everything, you know. It's community. It's art. It's geography. It's investigative journalism. Like, they all feed each other, and so that's how I just think that the links are so intertwined that.
Are there things you want from the art world?
Yes.
I'll write them down. I'll send a letter.
I want the art world. The art world is way bigger than what is called the art world. I want the art world to get really bold and stand up directly to keep people in their homes. I don't know one art institution that has actually made a statement about evictions or lots of other things. So I'm just wondering when institutions that have all of the backing and everything, and that they will last longer than we will in this town, will make a bold move and say they're against evictions and help us stay here. Yeah. That's what I want from the art world. And I think it's possible if more people demand it.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So now we have Julio Salgado, who is here tonight representing CultureStrike.
Hi, how are you? Don't be asking me hard questions.
Okay. Define art.
Define art.
It's so good to meet you and talk to you, and I admire your work so much. And I think the first thing I wanted to ask you was about risk-taking. I get asked this question a lot of, how do you do these things? And what if there's cops and everything? And so you are taking really big risks, more than me. And so I wanted to just ask you kind of how you go about making those decisions that seem really dire, you know?
Right. I always say that, oh, I'm loud, sorry. Okay, good. So I'm assuming you're referring to me being undocumented, so handing out papers. So it's a little risky, but I think that, since people started coming out of the shadows, which is when people started, saying like, I'm undocumented and I'm unafraid, around 2009, 2010, I remember I had just graduated from college, and I had this degree that I couldn't use, And I was like, feeling sorry for myself. I was like, oh my God, I went to school for like 9.5 years. It took me a minute. When you don't have papers, it's kind of hard to get through college. But, I always say that the good thing about it is that I get out without debt because I didn't qualify for loans, but I had this degree, right? And so I had this degree, and around that time, all the students started coming out and saying, you know what, if you're going to talk about being undocumented, if you're going to talk about immigrant issues, you need to look at us. You need to see us and, see who you're talking about. And so in May of 2010, it was the first civil disobedience by undocumented students at McCain's office in Arizona. And I remember being on my Facebook feed and like looking at all these pictures, and I was like, oh my God, what the hell? They're gonna get arrested, they're gonna get deported. But they were just only doing in the tradition of civil disobedience and really putting your body in the line to really make change. And so seeing all that was like, okay, I need to figure out how I can help. I'm not an organizer. I could draw. And I remember I had just seen that documentary, oh my God, I'm forgetting, Exit Through the Gift Shop, that pseudo documentary. And I remember looking at it, and most of the street artists in that documentary were white. And I was like, okay, I kind of want to make art about this whole situation that was happening. But if I go in the streets looking the way that I look, bald-headed Mexican, my getting arrested is going to be a little bit different. And so what I ended up doing to kind of like conquer that fear that you were talking about, just to go back to the original question, social media. I started using Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr, and I don't think there was Instagram at the time, to share my art, because what I was seeing was that the media was covering all this civil disobedience that happened throughout 2010, and they would come and they would write an article, take a picture, and bounce, but we were still undocumented, and we were still, and the way that they were covering is like, oh, illegal students are trying to get papers. And to me, I was like, fuck you, media. Sorry, can we curse? Is that okay? It's fine. And so I was like, I need to take back some of these images and make sure that the context was ours, that the background, that the media that was being put out there was by us. And so I started making all these images that other undocumented folks were seeing online, and they were sharing it. And I think that really seeing that first civil disobedience by undocumented students really pushed me. And another thing was the fact that it was 5 students who got arrested. 4 of the 5 were queer. And as an undocumented or queer person, I was like, yo, okay, yes, I need to document that and make sure that people know that the people behind these actions were queer and undocumented. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it was them who kind of pushed me.
Let's talk about queerness and,
Yes.
and radical art making. So, yeah, I mean, what do you, how do I phrase this? Queers are at the forefront of a lot of movements right now. Everywhere. So what is your queer radical visions for your work and your collaborative work and the movements that you're involved with?
Yeah, I think again, going back to the fact that the fact that 4 of them were queer, and remembering from past movements that whenever you're queer, you're like, okay, don't talk about that part. Talk about the issue. Don't talk about your gay agenda, whatever that means. And to me, I was like, because within the immigrant rights movement, you had a lot of religious folks that were like hella down for immigration. They're like, yeah, we should pass immigration reform. Like, let's everybody, let's take care of our immigrants. But don't talk about the gay stuff because we had a lot of religious folks. And so to me, that was like very hypocritical. And so when folks were like coming out and they were like, we're undocumented and we're queer, I was like, yes, they were really being, their full selves. And again, it was about document that piece. I'm pointing the piece that I made over there, the Homeland Security. It talks about the different issues that, because even within the gay community, that was another part. All they wanted to talk about was gay marriage and joining the military. And so for me, it's like, there was more that to us, as when we're in that intersectionality. I also learned the word intersectionality, the fact that you have to talk about both issues, because they're both important, and that's just 2 things, right? And to me, I was like, I could not include that in my art, and it was from the folks who were organizing. They were like, you're queer. You need to talk about these things. You need to push, the fact that, we're immigrants and we're queer. And so, so it's very intentional. And it's always like kind of, that piece is about like kind of making fun, because I'm like, you could like be super, it's very sad, some of the experience that we go through, but to me, trying to find a way to kind of throw back some of the words that people throw at us, from being called a faggot, being called illegal. I was like, yeah, well, I'm an illegal faggot against borders, And so just kind of taking those those words back and throwing it back at you, it's important for me. And some people don't agree with it. Even within the migrant rights, it's like, no, you have to be more like, check your language that you're using, because we need to show America how good of an immigrant you are. And I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that, because try being perfect. That's not healthy. And so I think that art really has allowed me to be able to, push those ideals out.
Life for lots of people is hard right now and seems like suffocating, for me anyway. So I wanted to ask you how you find joy and connectedness over rage.
Hi, girl. Well, see, I mean, I think for me,
More like how does it not overshadowed all the time by like such angst and anger?
I think humor. It's key in trying to find humor, which is hard, because how do you find humor in, when you're undocumented and you're thinking about getting deported or displaced from homes. I think that for me the key has been humor. And if you talk to immigrant rights folks on Facebook, like we're always like joking about certain things. I have another project called Dreamers Adrift, and we use video and sketch comedy to kind of deal with some of these issues and again kind of so we have this series called Undocumented and Awkward, how it could be awkward to tell somebody that you're undocumented. Check it out, dreamersadrift.com, Undocumented and Awkward, plug. And so what we do and with these videos is we sort of reenact situations that you deal when you're undocumented. One of my favorite personal ones is that I got to reenact this date that I went on with this Latino Republican guy. I know, they exist. And I played the Latino Republican guy, and the experience was like, it was hilarious, sad, and 1 minute. And 1 minute, right? Okay. And then and she's like, reenacting those moments. Again, it's all about like, this happened, but I'm gonna make fun of it. I'll make you look like a fool, and throwing it out there. And then when we start, pushing these videos, it's like, yes, we need to laugh. We need to find some type of, way to smile at the things that are tragic in our lives, because tragic. It's not cute, but it's part of it. What it is. So laugh. Yeah, that's it. Oh yeah.
Thanks, Leslie. So now I have Krystle Ahmadyar coming up, who is Ruby Mountain. There's a person behind Ruby Mountain.
Good to see you too. So I didn't come as prepared, but good thing I follow your music and I love you, and so we're just gonna chismear, we're just gonna like, kind of like gossip style. So I guess my first question would be, I was listening to some of the pieces that you had here. One of them Revolution, and the other piece, I forget the name of the other song.
It's Only Revolution.
It's Only Revolution?
Yeah,
I thought it was two songs. And so when did you come to the terms of like, okay, I need to use my music to talk about some of the real shit that I'm going through in my community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's nothing I've ever really thought about. It's just something that has happened and is happening. I think being a woman of color, being queer and facing so much oppression on a day-to-day, it just makes sense to use art and music to express these type of narratives, to make them visible. And But to go way back, I think what really prompted me to speak about love and hardship and struggle is my father. I grew up listening to him sing Afghan songs, and just to see the power that he had over an audience. You know, he could bring people to tears, he could bring them to joy. So from a young age, I learned that music is a type of medicine, and so I think I just, it's happening in this type of way, and I feel really grateful and blessed that I can use music to speak the truth about community and myself.
And you recently took a trip with your dad, right? Like last year, you went back to Afghanistan, and how long had your dad not been? Had he gone back a few times? Or?
No, this was his first time back. It had been 42 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and it's terrible, the state of the land there now. And yeah, I feel really honored that I got to go with him and support him, because, you know, I've never visited a country that had just, the war is still happening there, but has just come out of a really dark time. And if you could visit places like this, you wouldn't ever wish war on any piece of land or people, because it's devastating.
What was the feedback that you got from your dad? You know, after so many years of, I mean, I haven't been able to go back to my country in like 20 years. Was that? Did you see that emotion? What did he tell you when he went back?
Well, I'll just share a quick story. Was that we were going to the bazaar in Kabul, and the Darya, the river, it's really big there and polluted now, but he immediately just started singing to the river, and like it was natural, and you know, that's what everyone does, but everybody just stopped what they were doing and looked at him, and he couldn't believe that people were so shocked that he was just singing to the river. And so that's just a snapshot of like how much the culture has changed because of just so much trauma that the people have faced. And I think what was the most upsetting for both of us is that a lot of our family got displaced during the wars. His house is still there and became a safe place, but a lot of people got displaced during the wars, and now they're getting displaced again because the rents are rising, and it's such a familiar story to what's happening here. Yeah. So that was upsetting to know that, you know, there isn't really a home in the homeland for the people. Yeah,
that's my biggest fear, to like go back to like something that it's not where you left, you know, it's not that anymore. And we have this idea of home, you know, and then when you get there, it's like totally not. And especially when there's like all these other things that are, you know, pushing it away from your idea of what home is. Now, you were born here in Oakland. I did some research. I wasn't that not prepared. You were born here in Oakland, and then you lived in Nebraska, and then you're back. Tell me about that shift. What took you over there, and what brought you here?
Well, my dad got transferred with his job, so that's why we ended up in Nebraska. And then I came back and went to Mills College, but I always knew I was coming back. You know, it's my song "Oak Tree" that I have is actually about the racism that exists in Omaha, Nebraska that I faced, and yeah.
it happens.
Yeah. And racism is real.
And I mean, how do you deal with it? Like, because I feel like when I do some of my art and I talk about racism, I'm like, too real sometimes. I'm like, some people are like, oh, you hate white people. It's like, no, it's not. It's not about that. Have you had any like negative feedback on the way that you approach, whether it's race or other things, where people like don't really get it?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like right now when I perform the song Revolution that's there, it depends who the audience is, but I also get this, I have to like root myself because I'm not really sure like what's gonna happen, like who's gonna say what or how it's gonna affect people. Nowadays, I feel like when I started singing and I was also in like the Occupy community, and there was a lot of police brutality happening, so people were very like welcoming of like the sample that starts the song, which is actually one of my friends getting arrested at a Mende show. So to answer your question, it's always, I never quite know what's going to happen, but I love the experience because oftentimes people will cry or people will just thank me afterwards, or sometimes folks who don't quite get it yet but are interested will come up and ask me why I'm singing this song. You know, like, did you really need to sing that song? I'm like, oh, so what did you think about that song? You know, or yeah, people, I never know how folks are going to respond.
Sometimes you'll be like, you know what, this is not for you. Maybe, you know, sometimes. Now, does that prepare you? Because I saw you with your band Los Sirenas, amazing Los Sirenas, check them out.
Check us out.
I don't know, like being on stage. I mean, being here is kind of intimidating. But do you think those experiences like transfer to being on stage and like having to deal with the audience? Like, does that having that experience like how does that transfer when you're dealing in live and the feedback from people?
I actually just performed at a queer open mic at Martuni's, and one of the people there asked me, or said that they thanked me for my set and said that they also wanted to write more about social issues, and I was like, well, if you want to, like, do it, you know? And he's like, well, I just don't know how to do it, and this is from a white person, and I said, it's really important that you find a way to tell your story the way that you need to tell it, because when I sing my songs, sometimes people get up and leave, and sometimes people stay and they have a really cathartic experience or just are so grateful to be, having this be said and heard out loud. And when I said that to him, he's like, you're right. I'm like, we have different audiences, and you have a particular type of audience which will be able to hear the message from you a lot better than from me.
I totally agree. Now, you do one of my favorite songs. When I went to go see you, did the Amy Winehouse cover. I'm not assuming that that's one of your favorite artists, but is there like an artist to you that, growing up you saw and I was like, and you were like, this is why I want to be a musician? Or maybe it wasn't a musician, maybe it was somebody else. Who's that, artistic influence in your life?
I really love Lauryn Hill. I like how real she is. Yeah, and I grew up listening to Aretha Franklin and Nina Simone, and so really got blessed, my ears got blessed with listening to a lot of women just sing everything, bare their soul through their voice. Yeah. And also just going back to my father, witnessing him and his brothers sing, and Afghan music has a different type of tonality and can put you in a different type of trance listening to it. So I think people who, artists that speak to me a lot are the ones that can move people through a note or through a phrase.
No, yeah, yes, I agree on everything. And women singers, I Selena know all the time. So what's next, and for your band and for are you still continuing doing the Ruby Mountain project?
Yes, I'm doing Ruby Mountain, and I'm looking to record soon and have an album, and Los Sirenas will be also continuing to play shows, places, but I just want to, I'm going to share one simple little thing. I'm going to sing a little bit.
Yes, do it, please.
How many times is it taking you to get up and walk away? Just walk away. I'm walking away. How many times has it grabbed you, convinced you to stay? Just walk away. Just walk away. Yeah. We don't have to follow today. The sun is gonna rise tomorrow. We can keep working towards seeing some better days. We don't have to follow today. The sun is gonna rise tomorrow. We can keep working towards seeing our better days. How many times is it taking you to get up and walk away? Just walk away. I'm walking away.
Oh my God.
Wow. Thank you for that. So thank you, Julio. Now we have Persia. Come on up, guys. Yay. Follow that. Persia and Van Hang. No.
I was going to, sit under.
Only if it's a performance.
Always. It's always Hey, girl.
Hey, you're looking fabulous as always.
Likewise, girl. Oh my God, I'm so nervous. I'm like sweating and good Lord, I'm gonna pretend I'm in a drag show. So how is everyone doing? Oh, that was good. But again, how is everyone doing tonight? Okay, I feel a little less nervous. Here, girl.
You
sorry.
are so wonderful, and I love that I get to speak with you right now. And I remember when you guys released that video. I think Sancha sent it to me, and it only had a couple views, and I'm like, this is gonna blow up. This is brilliant. This is amazing. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that process of how you all decided to make this.
Well, I mean, you had this idea, and you came to Daddy's Plastic, and you were like, I really need to make this happen, and can you help me make it happen? And we were like, hell yes. I mean, it was probably, to this day, is the most exciting thing I've ever worked on. Just because it was so more than myself, and just I think we didn't realize how big, we just had no expectations, but we just knew that it needed to happen, and so.
Yeah, I'm just a simple drag queen, and I don't know much about things. So I was going through a really rough time in my drag home, this old bar, many of you know. It was called Esta Noche. It was on the verge of losing its entertainment license because they couldn't afford. Anyway, it's a complicated, stupid story. And so I felt, my drag home, it's being taken away from me. I had been performing there for 5+ years, and then while that was happening, our landlord was trying to evict us, my boyfriend at the time, and he was just leaving notes under our door all the time, just harassing us. And then he decided he was just gonna increase our rent by 15%, which I really didn't know much about, rent control and the laws behind it and all that. And so I got, educated. I got, educated on that and figured out my rights. And so that was going on. And then also our friend Sancha, she was couch surfing because she couldn't afford a place in the city. You were being evicted. And then our friend Tyler was also going through some stuff. So it was just, everything was happening all at once. And it was just so hard to have your multiple jobs because you have to if you are not wealthy, or if you're not wealthy, you have to hustle. And then on top of that, you want to do your art. So you're doing all these things to try to survive, and then more things get piled on. And so I was just going through such a rough time. And after seeing them, Daddy's Plastic, perform at the Eagle one night, I just got so inspired because they were so good. It was like they did new songs. There's 3 new songs. And I was like, oh my God, I wish I could sing, but I can't, but it's okay. Thank God for technology. See, we don't hate technology. Technology is your best friend. It's just the greed behind it. And so then after seeing them perform, I was just I went on my phone and I was just writing everything that was just coming to mind. And then once they were done, I went up to them. I was like, pardon my language, but I was like, bitches, you're gonna help me write this goddamn fucking song. Because I am tired, everyone's pissed at me, everyone in Esta Noche is mad at me. It's just, everything is going on, and you guys are gonna help me do this. And everyone's like, yeah, let's do this. In a few days,
I think we sat down all together and wrote and produced it all in one night. Wow. And then, what was it, a week later, we recorded it?
Okay, so we got together on a Friday.
Yeah.
And then we got together again on a few hours on a Monday. Then we recorded it on Wednesday, and then we performed it at the fundraiser at Esta Noche that Friday. So we literally in a week.
How long was it between that and then when we shot the video? It was very quick.
About a month or
Yeah.
so, yeah. And that was also like an hour and like a filming or something,
Oh,
right?
yeah, we only
Something.
had-
Yeah, Sloan,
She filmed it.
she filmed it, yay. Thank you, girl.
So yeah, we only had this studio for like literally an hour, and they were like, okay, here you go. And we're like, oh God, we got to do this.
And then you came up with the whole thing, and
Well, and I think the funny thing is like how the video was like edited and everything was using literally these technologies that were like kind of, or like that we're critiquing a bit. Like, I use like the street map vision, and I'm just scanning through it, and I'm just screen grabbing everything. And then there's a part where like we're tagging you in a pic, and so I uploaded a green picture to Facebook as like a green screen, and then like tried to tag you in it, and then like took that, keyed out the green, and so just like using these
very
technologies to like actually make this video. And so it's just like a really interesting and ironic process.
yeah, it was crazy. And then we premiered it during that was Stop Being Poor. That was the second single.
It's all too much, I can't remember.
So we premiered it during the weekend of Pride, and then we made it live July 1st of 2013, and we really didn't think anything of it. And then a few days later, it was crazy.
So how has the drag community been reacting to it? Do you feel like you're getting support around it or not? I'm kind of curious about that.
Well, it's been mixed.
Yeah.
Because I went from just being a drag queen to being now a political queen. And because a lot of folks want to stay away from the political part of it. I mean, I don't call myself political. I never sought that. We did this project because of what we were going through. But a lot of folks, because of it, I've lost many jobs because of it. Because they're like, oh no, she's a political queen. We don't want to mess with that. You don't mix entertainment with politics. And so, but it's been fine. I've been fine, so don't worry. But I feel that it's been really, even now, still like, and so I've done a few things where I throw in Google Apps, and I've been, after I get out, they're like, oh, those angry political queens, and they try to laugh it off. But yeah, it's been really interesting. How about for you?
Same.
Do you think part of that lens that tries to label you as political is rooted in white supremacy?
Well, it's interesting because we thought we were going to get all this backlash when the video came out, but it took 6 months. 6 months, and I was getting emails left and right. It was in like late December. Maybe maybe the holidays brought it out in people, but we were being called reverse racists. And first of all, this video is not about white people. Let's get that straight. When we say, I just wanna be white, it's looking at our own communities and critiquing ourselves, because I know growing up in a Mexican household, I was the darkest. And so I was, quote, the ugly one, because what? I was the darkest. And I mean, I grew up in South Central LA, and my neighbors were African American, and also they're like, oh, you're blue-black, so you're ugly. Or like, so it's different communities, like, experience different things. And so I try not to think about that, because that's not my, that's not my problem or anything. But it was just really interesting how towards like 6 months later, we called reverse racist and all this stuff. So it's been interesting.
I mean, it's been a huge learning process for me. I mean, being predominantly white and white passing, and I learned a lot about myself and a lot about this community that I grew up in, that I didn't realize I had all these things ingrained in myself, and that I had racist thoughts, And this was just like the hugest like growing experience for me, and I had to face a lot of things that I was not comfortable with. And I think that's what a lot of people a lot of white people, they get like sort of like defensive when they're called racist or they are called out, but I think people really legitimately like need to like look at themselves and be like, no, wait, you are part of this system and you're thinking and saying these things that you may not like be choosing to say, but were like really ingrained in you. And so, yeah, that's why I just feel blessed to be having like being a supporting role in this and like.
I really liked that part. I just want to be white. Like I just couldn't stop laughing about it because I felt like you were.
It's really.
You were touching on internalized racism, assimilation, people putting, that power that white folks can have like over on a pedestal and just making it super clear in this really hilarious way. Like I really like
Yeah,
that.
we just had to like do it campy and
We had to make it fun. I was like, I'm not doing this song if it's not dancey. So there.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good.
Oh my God.
Now I'm nervous.
I'm so nervous. Yes. So one of my questions, I think not just for you, but for everyone who's here is just, how do you do like the hustle, the art, and everything that comes with it without like going crazy?
Well, I'm certifiably insane, so I might not be
Okay.
the person to answer that question.
I think we all are a little bit, right?
Jeez. I don't know. It's sort of like when I had my daughter and when I got pregnant, and I left her father when I was like 4 months pregnant, right? And then I had her, and then you just had to do, right? And people were like, well, how do you do that? How do you, it's here, so you do, you must. And so it's the same thing with the art and the politics. I don't know that that's a choice, it's just, we do, because we have to, and it's here, and we have to get it out. And then you also have to eat, right? So, and I like to sleep inside, so I do because I have to. And I think that that's true of most of the artists and activists that I know.
So that's what keeps you motivated. That's what keeps pushing your work. And you have a question? Sorry, I'm really nervous. I'm like usually, crazy and on stage, but this is a little different. But yeah, so do you feel like there's one thing in your life that you're like, okay, I'm an artist, I'm this, I've made it this, I don't know how to, sorry, I just totally blanked out.
Let me just take over. So I wasn't even planning like on coming here. I just had time. So tell us. No, it's true. I'm not prepared, but I will just jump in and support this boo. Tell us about your piece.
Sure,
Here.
sure. So my piece is about Natasha McKenna. Natasha McKenna was 38 years old, black woman who was murdered in the Fairfax County, Virginia jail. She weighed 130 pounds, and she suffered from schizophrenia. And she had called the police because she was being assaulted. And instead of them helping her, they arrested her, which triggered, a mental breakdown. And then instead of getting her help, which so often happens, they took her to jail and threw her in this room and allowed her to sort of spin out, and getting her no help, no medication, no nothing, just left her in this room. And then she had a warrant at another jail, another county over, so they decided again, instead of taking her to the hospital and getting her help, that they were going to transfer her to another jail. And as they came in to get her, the first thing she said was, "You promised you wouldn't kill me." So she's got mental health issues. She's now communicated to you that she thinks you're gonna kill her. They're in hazmat suits, which I don't suffer from schizophrenia. I don't know, but I imagine as I'm doing the piece, what that must have looked like for her, right? To not have any human faces engaging with her. So she's buck naked, she doesn't go quietly, and they end up tasing her 4 times. And for people who don't know, one tase contains 50,000 volts of electricity. So in the piece, and this is just one piece, I'm in the process of completing the entire one-woman show, but in the piece, it's them extracting her from the jail and then tasing her. The piece ends with her being tased 4 times, and then she died later.
So this is part of a series that you're working on?
So I'm working on when I started the project, I thought what I wanted to do, so I do a lot of work with an organization called the Anti-Police Terror Project. I co-founded that organization. And my activist calling, I think the question you were trying to get to with that is police terror. I've been on the ground in the streets most of my life. I was raised in an activist household, but when Oscar Grant was murdered, I just I got a laser focus. I can't explain it. It just was like that. This is it. There's a whole bunch of ways that my people are being oppressed and tormented and et cetera, but this is where my soul is for whatever reason. At that time, when I assumed that role, we were only talking about black men, right, or brown men. We were not talking about women. It's really the Say Her Name movement, which is a result of the movement for Black Lives that we're talking about women. And that, for me, even was a spiritual shift. Like, I can't explain it, to be talking about women that looked like me, that lived like me, that moved like me, that had children like me, shifted something in me. And so when I first started the piece, I thought that I wanted to write a series. So I thought I wanted to do like Yvette Henderson, who was 38 years old, gunned down with an AR-15 on the Oakland-Emeryville border, a piece about Natasha, Sandy, Rakia. I thought I was gonna do the series. And then it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, I was laying in bed, should have been sleeping, and literally Tasha was just talking in my head, to the point where I had to get up and I had to start to write. And then the piece just became about her. And it was I was just really clear that like, it's her story that I needed to tell. So that's a very long-winded way of saying that this will be a one-act play. And I'm thinking that maybe, we'll see who talks to me next at the second half, maybe Yvette Henderson, but the completed piece for sure will be Tasha's story.
And where will that be?
So coming up, I actually have dates. I guess I better get to writing. So it'll be at Eastside Arts Alliance, August 11th and 12th, and then it will be at the Flight Deck the last weekend in August and the first weekend of September.
Awesome.
So just, just trying to connect all of these things that are happening in technology and these instances that have been happening, but we're beginning to see them, a lot more often and on social media. And I think even though social media has all of these problems, I think what is great about it is that these stories are being shared so often, and it's really bringing to light on a larger scale to people who have been ignoring it, and may not have known. So do you see that as being that's a positive thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an interesting conversation happening on social media right now about people are asking for trigger warnings or asking you not to share the pictures of black bodies dropping day to day because for the fear that it normalizes it. I don't take that tact, actually. I think that for black and brown people, it's been normalized, right? Before social media, before film, we were really clear that this was happening in our communities. And I think that in the culture of white supremacy, the need to deny is still so strong that we have to keep saying it. I mean, even now with all the social media, even with an international movement for Black life, I still have conversations with people that are convinced that we're making this up, right? That a bunch of black people got in a room and said, how do we want to fuck with white people today? Oh, I know. Let's make up this story about being brutalized every 28 hours, right? That still exists. That's still a very real narrative that's in the world. And so I think that the power of social media is that it gives us an easy way to combat that narrative. It also allows us to communicate with each other, right? So Baltimore can talk to Oakland, Oakland can talk to Ferguson, Ferguson can talk to New York, New York, right? In real time. And I don't think we can discount that. I don't think we've harnessed the power of social media in the way that we need to really make an impact. I think we have a lot of lessons to learn in terms of how to truly organize, how to use it to really push movement and not drama. But I think that there's something there that's incredibly powerful.
I agree.
No, it's just pretty powerful what you're saying, and again, I'm just kind of God, the nerves got the best of me, but yeah, no, I'm really interested to see your first act and how it'll evolve to the second act that you were talking about. So yeah.
So I guess I'll just take the last minute to.
I'm sorry.
To do my normal thing about get involved, right? Like I think that people are listening and they're awake or they're half woke, but we're not moving enough, right? We're not doing enough. We're not challenging enough. And when I started this work, this section of the work, which was with the Onyx Organizing Committee around Oscar Grant, we were the only sort of Black militant organizing group in Oakland that was alive at that time. That's not the case anymore, right? There are a plethora of groups to the point where we're like going to dissolve Onyx and just focus on the Anti-Police Terror Project. And then there's allied groups, right? Like some of the most amazing allied work happening that I've ever seen in my life. You got Asians for Black Lives, you got BASAT, you got Surge. And so there's places to plug in, and the other thing that I hear from people is like, well, I can't go out there and challenge the police. I can't, you don't have to. I promise you don't have to chain yourself to a bridge to get engaged. You don't, right? We need people to do childcare. We need people to cook food. We need people to help us figure out what that social media strategy is. We need people to donate. We need people to coordinate volunteers. We need people to donate their services and make us brochures. We need people who have connections to funders to talk to them and tell them to fund the work. So there is a role for you, and please get engaged because our lives depend on it.
What website or how do we get a hold of?
Antipoliceterrorproject.org or catbrooks.com.
January 1st, 2014, I was coming back home from a vigil that they have at the Fruitvale Station. It's an annual vigil, so
That's the Oscar Grant one.
the Oscar Grant vigil. And I just felt inspired to do a piece of his real quick just to honor his name and put it out online. And I got a good response, so then I felt to continue with another design, and then after that it just, it was a project that I continued with, with the designs that I kept putting out. But the reason why I felt so inspired by the Oscar Grant case is because when I first moved out here, it was in 2009. It was like a little less than a year after his killing. And I remember I was living on 17th and International, which was the route that was taken by the protesters at that time when on a couple nights, I remember there was like some smashing of windows of houses and whatnot, of private property that ran that route. And I remember our landlord put up wood on our windows. And I remember that leaving an impression on me like, wow, it's crazy how folks out here in Oakland are holding down this issue when back in LA, I mean, there's a lot of activism out there, of course, and also with like police brutality, but the response that I was witnessing out here in Oakland left an impression on me when it comes to police killings, more specifically with Oscar Grant. So that's how the project started, was something that I didn't intend to come out as an ongoing project. I didn't want to waste too much time creating that initial design. I just wanted to release it because at the time I was more focused on my paintings and work that I was doing with CultureStrike at the time. So yeah, just given the response that I was receiving from putting out these designs is what encouraged me to persist with it. And so now it's a ongoing project. I think I have like a little over 50 portraits that I've released so far.
It feels to look at it, and we've been engaged enough to where there's this process that's evolved, right? Somebody gets murdered by the police and we end up with this portrait by you. It feels almost ritualistic. Is it? And if so, can you talk about how?
Yeah, ever since this project has developed into something where like people have been noticing it, and it's like a part of the story that has been told more so out here in the Bay Area. It seems like now whenever there's someone else who unfortunately loses their life to police violence, I get hit up by family members, by activists. Just recently there was the homeless man that was killed out here in San Francisco.
Luis Gongora.
Yeah, and I've been receiving all these requests, and I feel so bad because I'm also trying to set aside time to explore other forms of art, because I'm not just only about the activism. I'm also about expressing, you know, being weird or whatever else it may be. I'm an artist, right? So it's been hard to manage that ritual that seems to take place now, where people are hitting me up. But I mean, I understand that, you know, because I've been putting out so much material, that's what people expect from me now with every killing that happens. And I'm totally down to take that up, because I do intend to continue with this project for as long as I can. But it is crucial for me to take breaks and focus on other aspects of my life that need maintenance and whatnot. But also the fact that this is a project that I took on myself. There hasn't been any organizations backing me up or anything, and I don't approach this as primarily an activist. I'm an artist first, and then an activist later or after, or at least as far as my experience has been with the way that I've engaged. So it's been hard for me to like maneuver through like all the possibilities that are out there with like funding and whatnot, because I just don't understand it and I don't have those connections yet. I've mostly approached it as like an artist, you know, releasing them online, and people can do what they wish to it, and that's the way that I've engaged, and organizations have been using my work, like Anti-Police Hair Project and others. So yeah.
So that's a way an ally could support, right? He needs help figuring out funding and how to do that. So, so I say sometimes when I'm talking about the work, you know, that we traffic in the business of dead babies, and that has an emotional toll. Mm-hmm. For you, I heard you say to manage the other parts of your life that need maintenance, but for you, what has the emotional journey been like to be consistently engaged, right, and drawing the faces of dead babies?
Yeah, well, I can't say this is a project that I enjoy doing. For the most part, as an artist, you would like to enjoy the work because it makes it worthwhile, you know? And this is as well. I'm not saying that it's not, but it is depressing, and at first, it was something that I didn't really think that I was taking in, because I'm a person that has sort of like a hard shell. I mean, I grew up in the hood, so I have that like machismo still sometimes, and you kind of like try to be tough about things, and I feel like, nah, it's not really affecting me. I mean, it is a tragedy, you know, but I mean, what can you do? You know, you can't bring the person back, but I have noticed in time that it does kind of like leave me a bit depressed when I read all these stories, and that's what my whole focus has been as far as my career goes for the last 2 years, has been all these tragedies, you know, and I have been realizing that it does take a toll, because I do think about death a lot. Like, why am I thinking about like tragedy? Like, if I go to the store, like, will somebody pull up on me and like want to shoot me because I'm like a Latino dude with long hair that's walking in Fruitvale, you know? So like that stays in the back of my head a lot more now, being that I've been so immersed in this issue. So that's the reason why I'm trying to find a space where I could just take a break and delve into other things that will sort of heal that kind of, you know. But yeah, I mean, it's a struggle, and even if it wasn't that, I think I would still kind of have like a like craziness, but yeah.
Do you want to talk about some of your other work? Like, what are some other things on the horizon, or other mediums that you're playing in?
So when I moved out, so I'm primarily a painter. That's what I consider myself, even though it's been my design work that has been giving me a lot of notice of the work that I do. But I present myself as primarily a painter. I'm known for my colorful geometric paintings. I mostly work with acrylic. The last art show that I had was at Soul Space. No, the last solo show that I had of my paintings was at Soul Space in downtown Oakland. That was 2013, a year prior to when I started that project. So I haven't done any real paintings since then. I have done a couple paintings that I sold to some friends of mine. But I'm trying to pick up the brush again so that I could start putting that back out. I just bought a camera. I want to delve into photography, and there's a few people out there that know about this, but I also like to rap sometimes, especially when I'm drinking. So like, if you're on Snapchat, you'll probably see a couple of my rhymes, or you know.
Or really quickly, because we're running out of time, you have a fundraiser going for your project. Where can people find that at?
I did have it running. I shut that down, but I'm still available to receive donations via PayPal. So just send it to my PayPal at Oree Original, N-O-L. There's no A in my name. People always misspell my name, and I hate that. But Oree Original with O's at gmail.com. You can send it to PayPal.
And a website?
OreeOriginal.com and JusticeForOurLives.com.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you do. Thank you. Respect, brother.
Thank you so much, Kat. Thank you, Oree.
You're
So Oree now is going to be speaking with Indira Allegra.
Cool, it's nice to meet you. So unfortunately, I have not met most of the artists that are showcasing at this event, you being one of them. So I had to do a little bit of research, and I've been so busy that I didn't get to do too much, but I definitely will follow up with a lot more after this.
It's all good.
But I was checking out your work, and what came at me more than anything else, or at least upon first looking at it, was that it was very geometric. And I was mentioning how I'm a painter and I work with a lot of geometry. But with this installation that I have here, I did take into consideration geometric patterns when I laid it out. And I wanted to ask you, do you feel that there's any significance to representing artwork in an abstract form that allows people to take in the art a lot easier, or maybe not? Like maybe it's harder to take it in, and therefore it's more effective because they get to think about it more. Can you talk about that?
Sure, yeah, it's a good question. So when I think about someone who walks into a situation wherein they're presented with content that's abstracted, one of the things that happens is that there are many layers of information that one needs to work through in order to actually approach the work, right? So it's not, it may not tell you something on the first glance. And I think with Blackout in particular, that was important to me in order to think about the time scale that we need to approximate when we're mourning something, you know? So to actually have an experience of viewing work that's slowed down. In terms of the use of geometry, what you're actually looking at is what's called a drawdown. So I'm a weaver, that's part of my training, and one of the tools that I use as a weaver is to take grid paper and to draw out the patterns in that way. So the dark areas are places where the warp threads are visible and the warp threads run up and down. And the light areas are places where the weft threads are visible and the weft threads run from left to right. And the actual pattern of the cloth that you're looking at there is the pattern that's used to make many police uniforms. It's a twill. And a twill is a go-to because it washes blood stains out easily. And a twill is a go-to because it keeps the crease in the pant leg even as the officer exerts him or herself. And that was something that I always found haunting when looking at footage of police brutality and in my own experience, and witnessing police brutality against members of my own family, how freshly pressed they look the whole time. So it became necessary for me to investigate the nature of that cloth and to understand a little bit more about the narratives encoded in that cloth. And to think about that cloth, the actual structure of it as a redactive device, right? So you see that there, the scrolling text are excerpts from families who have lost loved ones to police violence. And as we try to access that text, it's obstructed literally by this larger structure, you know, the structure of that clothes, the police state.
Cool. I also saw that you incorporated text into these designs, and I think I read that they're statements from eyewitnesses of
From
police.
actual families who have lost loved ones to police violence, yeah.
How did you acquire all that information?
The interwebs,
Okay.
yes. I think that this is also thinking about our mourning process that is the part of it that the internet has taken up for us, right? Because it's like, I think we all know that when we have lost someone who is close to us or seen something horrible happen, that the grief spills out of our bodies. We can't really fully or neatly contain the expanse of that emotion. And so I think that one of the ways that the internet is kind of functioning right now for us is that it holds, in a different form, it holds a lot of that grief, that spillover. When we think about our social media feeds that are constantly scanning and scrolling, I feel like that is I think of that as thread. Those are, narrative threads that are literally creating the cloth of our grief, of our mourning in another form. So you're in another space.
Okay. So I'm gonna base my next question off of the list that I got.
Awesome.
Okay. The first one, I guess. How did you become involved in civic engagement, social activism, movement building activism?
Okay. I think what I'll say first is that I don't believe that there's such a thing as an apolitical space. So there's no way for me to have not been involved because we're all born into political space. So I think the way that I can best answer that is to maybe I can speak more specifically to ways in which I have expressed the political nature of the space that I was born into. But I think like many of us, I was certainly raised in a household where we talked a lot about labor, and we talked a lot about capitalism even. Mine was not the house that you came over as a kid. I went over to other people's houses to play. No one wanted to watch documentaries at my house. It just really wasn't, really wasn't happening. Walking picket lines with my mom and caring for homeless folks who lived in our community. And, it's not exotic stuff. I think it's just kind of if there's someone in your neighborhood who needs help or a friend of the family who's in a bad relationship and needs to get out and you have a couch, then you put one and one together and you know what you should do. So I think for me, I feel like it's an everyday thing. Activism is it's a domestic thing. It could be a digital thing. It's whatever, you make of it, but it's your sensibility of already being born into political space. And in our gallery is a political space. And the BART is a political space. And there's nothing extraordinary about that. It already is. So that's how I feel about it.
Cool, nice. I guess this might end up being my last question. So how is your work meaningful for you? question.
No, it's okay. How's my work meaningful for me? It helps me to metabolize grief. I think anything that helps to draw like connections between, you know, stories that may be closer to me or my family and other family stories, that's helpful. Anything that activates empathy is helpful. That's kind of like a language that we're not very fluent in, that we struggle with, I think, as a whole in society. And so being able to find ways to practice empathy is ongoing. So.
Okay, all right, well, there's still time left. So you grew up in Oakland?
No, I was born in Detroit, and then in the 80s when the crack cocaine epidemic hit or was introduced by the feds, or however you want to think about it, my mom got a job transfer and we moved to Portland, Oregon, and it is as weird as it is portrayed on TV. That's all I'm actually at liberty to say.
Okay, well, thank you.
It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Likewise.
And I just really appreciate your work so much. I had the pleasure of just arriving a few minutes early and being able to spend some time with it. And one of the things that came to the fore for me was a sense of that we fetishize data, you know, and the ability to kind of create data points for everything, like, you know, and so I kind of see this as being like a social biometric that is happening here. And my question is, for everything that data seems to reveal, are there things that are actually concealed also too by data, maybe generally speaking, or that you feel like are concealed in the data points in this work?
So if I understand your question, is something hidden in data? I think yes, right? I mean, probably I don't think anyone's shocked by that. You know, this piece here began in 2014 as a series. So you guys don't know what's behind the wall. I keep pointing back to, like, you know what's back there. There's a 3D gun that was released on the internet back in 2013. It's called the Liberator. You guys might remember that from the news. And that just blew me away. You're really gonna take this data and you're going, you know, under some understanding of freedom of speech, that somehow data is neutral. And as a kind of statement of neutrality, this thing can kind of go out there and live, and whoever puts it out there gets to release themselves from absolve themselves from any sense of responsibility. I'm just totally surprised by that. Yet it happens all the time, I guess. And so the project was to take that same data and then cross the data points with all the, it's a little more complicated than this, but basically the data was deformed by all the handgun homicide rates from around the world. And so you take that same file and you process it through an algorithm that distorts it by its potential damage, and what you get is that image. And actually what it was a series of engravings. And then when Christian said, hey, you know, I want to put you in the show, one of the things that, and I'd be curious to hear your answer to this, one of the things that is hard when you work in these abstract spaces is, how does anyone get the focus of that work? Mm-hmm. You know, it might be beautiful, it might be kind of engaging, hopefully, but can people access the threads, the activistic point, right? And so when I had the opportunity to do this, I go, well, let's make it immersive so that it just overwhelms. And then maybe, you didn't ask this part, but I'll keep going.
Keep going.
Maybe abstraction can reach the level of meaning so that it's not just pretty, but you sense in some kind of pre-cultural way, which I suppose is impossible, but...
impossible?
Yeah, but approaching that there's something essential when you look at abstraction that hits you on a non-intellectual level, mm-hmm. you know, hits you before intellect. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, the idea is, could you take something born of logic and turn it into something with a pre-intellectual edge that does more than just be a series or a sum of numbers, I guess.
So in an attempt to, so I see it as being kind of a sequence of translations that happens, right? So you're talking about the data points and circumventing a very like cerebral understanding of it, and then sort of sensing into the work through the enormity of it, and then what? Outside of that, are you, is there an empathy that's activated, or is it about the objectness of itself? Because it does have a formal beauty to it, quite
Sure.
frankly, you know?
Yeah, I mean, on some level, it's kind of like painting.
Yeah.
You know, like it's this sort of abstract visual language.
That's
but
how I read it.
the empathy part, it's important for me that the work that I make, I'm not someone who works from this kind of point of expression. It's not about me. I mean, of course, on some level it is, but the idea is that it should be about you. You know, you should look at this, hopefully, and absorb something more about what is this culture that I'm taking part in that allows this to happen. And, you know, having worked in a more direct ways, I wonder if we're post-direct as a society. Yeah, what does that mean?
Yes, no, so I'm interested in it.
Do you have to develop ways that attract, inform, persuade, that are not about direct communication, because we've gotten to a point where we can filter out anything that we find uncomfortable?
Right.
And so is a way to empathetically pull people into the discussion by not trying to speak directly, but by being more seductive, I suppose. And so that's the beauty part, is sort of trying to work in a way that hopefully has a bit of seduction.
Yeah, I could see it as being an effective strategy in that way, for sure. I was also curious about your choice to represent data that's meant to be like 3D printed in a flat form. So that's one question. And then the other question that goes with that is, I was thinking about the nature of the point, right? So if there's even such, and the point after a while becomes like a fiction, right? Because it's not just that one, and I think your work speaks to this, it's not just that one particular handgun that's being printed, but it's the entire household that's impacted as a result, or the workplace that is impacted as a result, so on and so forth, because we are not just ourselves, we have all these other relationships that are impacting our life at the same time. So could you speak about, your decision to represent this in a flat way, and if you have ideas or have thought about a way of sort of representing data in a very rhizomatic, with a rhizomatic sense, you know, so that those interconnections between, it's not just the person who prints the gun, but the other people who are living with them, that sort of thing.
Well, the first question is a little bit easier, and the answer's kind of boring. Once the 3D data became so deformed, there was no way to turn it back into, it's just impossible to realize in 3 dimensions. Although I certainly thought about it and bothered a lot of technically savvy 3D printing people to try to figure out, could we turn this back into objects? Yeah. The rhizomatic idea you're talking about, one of the things that I've wondered about this way of trying to work, and I think one of the reasons why we're talking to one another is that your work has a very, or at least this piece has a very sort of data-centric quality to it, and it's almost like a texture of data. And your thoughts about twill and fabric and weaving sort of bring in that same, I don't know, flattening of media, you know, real things into digital space. And so I've wondered, and this is the way I'm going to try to answer that question, should there be some way that you can identify, oh, that data point refers to that particular incident, or those data points refer to that particular country, which is the streams of data that I was working with. And I figured, or I thought that that might take away from the larger impact of, on the one hand, looking at this thing as a piece of painting, and then at the other hand, being shocked by what produced it. And I didn't want to devolve into detail, I suppose. I shouldn't say devolve, but I didn't want to be working at the level of that detail.
I understand, yeah, the nature of it. I think, well, we're short on time. Did you have anything else that you would like to see? Things on the horizon?
Well, maybe a question back to you.
Alrighty.
Do you, when you think about, and maybe you don't, but there's a bunch of text data in your work, in this particular piece. I think about this a lot, and similar to the answer that I just gave. Does it bother you if people don't engage with it more for more time, if it passes over them as a surface? Or are you disappointed that there's not a kind of longer engagement?
I mean, as someone who works with craft, I have a lot of patience for the amount of time that it takes to actually experience something being made. And so I bring that same sensibility to media, even as I engage with it on any screen, that it takes a while for something to be made. So it's my hope that someone learns to do that. They may not get it right away, but I think it's a good skill for all of us to have, to allow things to come to form and allow for that time to happen.
And for our last 30 seconds, we are now going to sing too, because it was so great when someone else did that. No, I'm kidding, not going to do that.
Nope. Nice to talk with you. Awesome.
Yeah, it's white guy with beards time for the evening. Maybe we can get these guys to come up here because they fit the. Nice to meet you, by the way.
Nice to meet you too.
Well, you know, those of you who have bared with us this long, it's good of you to stick around. Christian Frock, the curator, said like, "Oh, don't prepare at all. You know, it's totally extemporaneous." And so I kind of did that. You know, didn't prepare that much. And I met Wes when we were sitting over here waiting, and I told him, "Oh, did you prepare?" And he's like, "No," but then you went and like scribbled a whole bunch of notes and that sort of thing, so you might be ahead of me here. So Wes, you work for Pitch Interactive, and maybe just tell these people what that is.
So this
or
is
you're the
what's
founder,
interesting.
excuse me.
Yes, so we are a data visualization studio based in Oakland. And my joke I was going to say at the end of this, I'll just say it now because it'll wake us up a little bit too, is that Oakland is really dangerous, okay? Don't move over there. That's my civic duty, to keep the rents down in Oakland. So I have to say that every time I come over to San Francisco. It's not always so bad. And I love Oakland. I've been there for 4 years. So we're a data visualization studio, and what we do is we work with data. We work with technology. We work with data, but there's a lot of passion and drive behind what we do. So we do personal projects, and I'll talk a little bit about this project here to give this sort of background. We visualize a piece showing all drone strikes in Pakistan that the CIA has conducted. And the background of that story is that every year and a half or so at the studio, we push away client work and we do work for ourselves. The work that we did before this is we did a visual comparison showing the linguistic comparisons between the Holy Bible, the King James Version, and the Quran at a time of like deep Islamophobia in this country. And so a lot of work that we do, we sort of look at what our policies are doing, what our governments are doing, especially to foreign lands, and how we're understanding other cultures that we in the media or we as a public society might see as a threat. And it makes me sort of, what I want to do is I want to question that idea. I actually grew up in the South. I grew up in Arkansas, of all places. And I grew up with this sort of formula that was always sort of fed to me, you know, play football, be a doctor. And I couldn't help but fight that all the time and question that, like, I don't want to play football. I want to ride a skateboard, you know, or I want to break laws and I want to do crazy shit and feel alive. And it even got to the point where I moved to Europe and I moved to Croatia when NATO was bombing Serbia, and I lived there for 3 years, sort of self-inflicting poverty upon myself, just because there was something about the effect of war on civilians, and especially from like greater powers, when there's very little empathy towards other populations that we don't see. They're literally out of sight, out of mind for us. And in what we're doing, and actually what wars are actually doing to other populations. So in 2012, John Brennan, who was the director of the CIA, came out in front of Congress declaring that drone strikes that we're conducting in Pakistan are morally right, they're constitutional. I don't know how he came into that. They're wise, surgically precise. We're only getting the terrorists Star Trek time. It's like laser focus. We're only getting the bad guys. And everyone was kind of cool with that because he said it. Not many people were asking questions, but then suddenly this independent study came out that was conducted by Stanford and NYU on the effects of drone strikes on civilians in northern Pakistan. It came out and it basically was showing that drone strikes are horrible for civilians. People were not sending their kids to school. Some of the drone strikes, one of them in particular in October of 2004, hit a school and killed 69 children. And the way that the US media spun it was that, oh, this was like a training camp for terrorists, and it was actually just a normal school. But it was a way that our media was able to spin it out of, and whether that was like government involvement, who knows? The CIA doesn't release very much of their data. But we were able to show that, and what we did was, it's a form of data dramatization. So we visualize data, but we can also dramatize it. And I think it's perfectly legitimate given the context of the actual data that we're showing. And what we really wanted to do with this was just to kind of show people, give a time span and sort of an animated representation of the strikes, how they've been carried out, how actually under Obama did exactly what he promised. He said he would increase technology in warfare, decrease soldiers, and it's exactly what he did. And he also increased a lot of the drone strikes that has been and still is going on. And we wanted to sort of showcase this data and give people a sense of how much we know, how much we don't know. There's a lot of gray. These are the alleged military combatants, it's any male between the ages of 14 and 40. There's just a lot of controversial information about it. And when we actually released this piece, it just took storm. Like, I actually had a nervous breakdown that first week because we had no press kit. The Economist picked it up. The Guardian picked it up. It was on Iranian news, on Pakistani news. Swedish documentary filmmakers were contacting us. We want to use this. We made everything open source. We just gave it out. Our logo, our name, logo, we don't put that anywhere on there. It's on like way deep down in the info if you want to find out who made it. But it wasn't really a self-promotional piece as much as it is a piece that we make under the philosophy that if you do the work that you love and you're passionate about it and you do something you believe and you bring that out, people will pay you to do more of that kind of work. That's how they'll identify you. And it's always making time to do something that you're passionate about. I think that's really important. You know, we have mouths to feed and whatnot, especially when you're running a studio with engineers and technologists. It's crazy expensive, but it's always making time to make sure that we're doing stuff that's passionate for us and that we believe in so that we can sleep.
It was a long answer, but we got a lot of information. Let me ask you something. So as someone who works with data too, although not, I think, at the depth you do, what do you want me to do? Like, when I see that piece, what do you want me to do with that experience?
I think the goal was to be aware. You know, I think self-awareness or awareness in general is key. It's information that you're sharing. And the real goal with that piece, the sort of success story, if there is one for us, was that we brought light onto a subject that everyone was sort of, oh, we've been told that it's fine, and they're drones, it's technology, it's unmanned, like US soldiers aren't dying, so we must be doing good, you know? And I think it's the reality of looking at the piece and sort of, a lot of times when I show this piece, you hear that sort of gasp when there's that growth. Right after, it's not just because Obama was sworn into office, it's also because Musharraf resigned. He pushed the CIA back on a lot of drone strikes. He had some clout in DC. His predecessor did not. But it was Obama taking office, and there's this big part, and it's just about, holy shit, you know, I had no idea that this was happening to this scale. And I think that's the most important part, and also making it somewhat interactive and where you can look at it. You know, you can explore it a little bit and get a sense, a visual sense too, that you can retain in your memory, and then you can go off and share that information with other people. And I think it served that fairly well.
Is it a potential further goal to have awareness lead to action?
I think yes. That's a really good question because that first week that I mentioned when I had a nervous breakdown, we actually had people like knocking on our door. We were in Berkeley at the time, now we're in downtown Oakland, but we literally had people like activists, because it's Berkeley, knocking on our door, come join us and do this. But I think it's honestly, what I want to do is drive people emotionally enough to figure out what can they do about it, or to be able to discuss it and have it, sort of counter what the media is saying or what politicians are saying, is that drone strikes are good, they're surgically precise, but actually have just more people in a general audience or society saying, no, like I'm questioning that. And what we actually saw, and it's interesting, right after it was launched, for the first half, I think, of 2014, there were no drone strikes in Pakistan at all. And I don't know if it was because of this piece. We had millions and millions of viewers, but it is that sort of curiosity. Did this create that pause? And then after that, you've seen much more precise, like you don't see any more women or children or civilians being killed since then. And my hope is maybe we had some sort of impact on that, even if it was a little.
With our last couple seconds here, one thing that I wrestle with is there's a kind of sense of, I don't know, objectivity about data. Mm-hmm. And then, at least for me, there's this need to aestheticize it in some way. I have to bring an aesthetic dimension to it so that it becomes more. Mm-hmm. And I feel guilty about that because I feel like, am I mitigating that objectivity because I'm adding something of myself in there? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think our brains I study a lot of like neurology and neuroscience. Our brains are wired to process visual information so much better than processing numbers and charts. And so I think that's a really important, we are in an era where a modern paintbrush is code. And I embrace that idea, is that we can use code and technology to create art. And that's important. I think it's using art to an advantage of communicating something. Because art it's been around for so long, and it has this like, certain forms of art have such a strong visual way of communicating emotion. And it's like, how do we communicate emotion with information? And get people to understand a really complex problem better so that we're better informed as we walk about the world and vote and do those kinds of things.
So maybe with emotion and information, that's a good way to end it.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you. So now Wesley is going to be speaking with Adrienne Skye Roberts.
But, well, here's actually the thing, because your piece, it focuses very much on incarceration, and I'd like you to talk more about it in depth. But incarceration is such a complicated topic. After the drone strikes, for example, like we were trying to focus like on incarceration in this country, like private prisons, ethnicity. Like if you're black, you go to prison, you come out. The chances of you being black versus white going back into prison are crazy high. You took a really much narrower, like pinhole focus on one very specific audience, and I'd like for you to talk about that.
Sure. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for still being here. So I am a longtime volunteer member of an organization called the California Coalition for Women Prisoners, and the piece in the show is called A Living Chance, Storytelling to End Life Without Parole, and it's the piece has been 2 years in the making, and I don't know when it will be finished. It will be finished when life without parole no longer exists. And so the piece emerged out of the organizing that I do with people who are incarcerated in the state prisons for women and trans people in the state prisons for women. And so it is a narrow focus, but it's a focus that emerged out of the relationships I have with people who are living and surviving life without parole inside or surviving life sentences inside. And so it came out organically from the organizing I was doing and am doing, and also it is a really specific community and really specific collaborators because that's a population and a community that is invisibilized in general, and people in prison invisibilized in general, women in prison, trans people in prison also further invisibilized, and then also within the culture of prison, people serving life without parole, they consider themselves like the forgotten population. And so to just say a little bit more about that, one of the reasons why that is the case or one of the reasons why I see that's the case and why this is like such an important moment to focus on that is because there's a lot of attention paid to the death penalty, as there should be. And in 2012, it was on the California ballot to repeal the death penalty, and it's going to be on the ballot again this November. And what that initiative says in the fine print is that we will get rid of executions in the state of California, but we'll move everyone from death row to life without parole in prison. And as I was talking to the people who I've been organizing with and building community with who are serving this sentence inside, they were like, it's the same thing. Like, well, we will die of natural causes in prison if you believe you can die of natural causes in prison, because a lot of us don't. So basically the project and the narrow focus emerged by what was missing in our organizing, what was missing in prison abolition movements and prison reform movements. People serving life without parole are never a part of any legislation because they're considered to be the worst of the worst. And so the project is narrowly focused for that reason.
So you did something interesting in this project. And I would like you to talk about that. So there's a limitation about people in prison, from what I understand. They can't have their pictures taken. And so talk about that. Like, what was your thinking? Like, why did you do what you did? Actually, say what you did, and then talk about like why you did that. Like, what was the motivating factor?
Sure. So people in prison can get their pictures taken.
Okay.
If you are have a social visit, you can get your picture taken. It costs $2. So that means you have to have someone on the outside who can travel to the remote location where the prison is, be able to pay the money to come see you. Or on rare occasions, like a graduation from a program or a special occasion, people will get their photographs taken. So part of the project, when I was collaborating with the folks inside, they said, okay, we want people to submit writing, letters, photographs, artwork, whatever they want. And so people sent in their photographs. And one of my very close friends, Billy Simoes Bello, is a self-taught painter, and she wanted to be involved. And we'd sort of been like trying to figure out how to be friends and also organizers together, and it was never working. And so this was a moment for her to sort of step in and say, I'll paint the portraits of these people based on the photographs. And so what you see in the exhibit is postcards with one side is their portrait, and then on the back is a piece of their writing that they had sent in. And then there's also an audio component that I hope people don't miss to call in, and you can actually hear their voices telling their stories. So the portraits are both like a visual reference point for the piece, because if it was up to me, it would be all interviews and all recording, because I don't know how to paint. And then it also serves as like a way of honoring and a gratitude for our collaborators. So everyone is getting like a high resolution copy of their portrait back inside. And I actually just 2 weeks ago went inside to do another round of interviews with people serving life without parole. We've done 30 so far. There are 60 altogether that we're hoping that we've talked to, and there's 177 people in women's prisons with LWAP. And I brought in Billy, who did the portraits, and she was meeting these people for the first time, whose pictures she had been painting for 2 years now, and it was like very moving to see them see each other and talk to each other, and it's a very special part of the project.
So I'm going to ask a difficult question.
Bring it on.
So a lot of us here are talking about the problems, and what I would like to focus on is a solution. So, and I guess maybe that's a little too complicated here, but life without parole, it's the same as a death penalty, or however you look at it. What's the solution to that?
Well, you're talking to someone who doesn't believe in the prison system at all.
Right. No.
Yeah, so I think it's a huge, what is the solution to it? I mean, I think partly it's about creating communities that are dealing with problems in different ways, right? That are sustainable, that are close-knit and tight-knit enough, and not based on fear and based on racism and based on all the divisions and all that capitalism creates, so that we can really hold ourselves accountable. It's like such a big picture thing, I don't even really know how to begin. And I know that there are small steps like that the organization I'm a part of, that my collaborators inside are taking to try to chip away. Actually, my friend Ellen, who's a fourth-generation San Franciscan Jew who is serving her 20th year on life without parole for killing her abusive husband at a time when courts wouldn't allow evidence of domestic violence. So she always says, I'm fighting a dragon with a teaspoon. Like, the system is the dragon, and I'm sitting here with a teaspoon. But I have to do it. There's no other way to do it. Like, I'm just going to keep chipping away and keep chipping away as much as I can because my survival depends on it. So I think about her, you know, and I think, I don't know, I don't have an answer to that, but I absolutely know we can do better than this.
Yeah, I think maybe the dragon is a good point, because when you think of dragons, typically, at least like the European kind, Chinese kind, totally different dragon, but the big fire-breathing, you know, it's a monster. There's no empathy there. And maybe that goal is to sort of teach that dragon to be like vegetarian, you know, or let's teach empathy to a system that really has very little empathy. I think that's...
Or let's get rid of it altogether.
Yeah, there's a lot of options.
There's a really
Blow
great
that shit up.
quote that I'm sure a lot of you know that's like the system can never fail those it wasn't meant to protect. And so that reminds me of something I'm going to ask Favianna in a minute, so hold on, everybody. But yeah, I mean, I think it's the system. No one that I work with has any disillusions about the system bringing them answers. You know, it's about finding the loopholes. It's about continuing to put pressure on people in power to develop empathy, to figure out new strategies. And it's also about seeing yourself as bigger than in the situation that you're in, because there's so much loss, continual loss.
My last question here, again, like I'm thinking like hopeful, like I always want to be hopeful when I wake up in the morning, because I feel like life is a choice, and how we live it is a choice, but not for all of us. And so I guess, do you see any hope in the near or distant future?
Well, yeah, I do, and I also, okay. I also work in schools, and the similarities between schools and prisons is so deep and so disturbing. At one of the schools that I work at, a sixth grader was just arrested by a cop on campus in front of his peers and walked out through the school in cuffs. So a lot of days I don't have hope, honestly. I'm like, the system is eating very particular people alive and taking them out of our communities. But the hope comes through the relationships, you know? And my friend, a woman whose portrait is in the project, Judith, who's an elderly woman, she's always saying to me, like, you're the vessel, you're just the speaker system. We tell our stories through you, and we have to pray that every day one person is moved to join our fight. So that gives me hope.
That's great. We'll close it there. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Wes. So now, Favi is the last artist.
Moving in their chairs. Hi.
Hi. Will you take me shopping?
Oh. You like my flowers?
Yeah.
It's my 80s look.
It's
I love
beautiful.
80s. I'm stuck in the 80s.
So I interviewed you.
Yes.
A while ago.
I know.
In like 2011.
I know.
5 years ago.
It was so great.
It was.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you said to me that was so important, because I was like dealing with my grad school baggage, my like art school grad school baggage, and I was constantly like, I'm an artist, I'm an organizer, how do I do both? And you just were like, you just do it. There's this thing called cultural organizing. You're a cultural organizer, get over it, you know, move on. It was like such a non-issue for you.
Yes.
So thanks for that.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if there was like a moment. I was thinking, like, the first question I wanted to ask was, like, how did you become Favianna Rodriguez? But, like, was there a moment where, like, the art and the organizing coalesced? Like, the earliest moment?
The earliest moment, oh gosh, that's a great question. I grew up in Oakland, and I also witnessed the effects of the crack cocaine epidemic, because I was raised in the 80s. I think that one thing that was said earlier is that I actually don't think that there's a separation between what's political and what's life. And I think that because of we centralize the lives of white people, that anyone who's a woman or if you're a person of color, it's seen as political, but I actually think that it's just life. I mean, what we're experiencing is a universal experience. So I think that for me, one of the times when I noticed, maybe when I really understood the power of culture and how it affects our behavior and our perception of ourselves, when I grew up in a very Catholic family, and all the messages that I would get was like, close your legs, don't get pregnant, don't get an STD. And I remember going to quinceañeras. Quinceañeras is when young Latinas turn 15 and they're wearing these like super white dresses, and we would hear these sermons about virginity, and I would be like, oh my God, everyone here is like already sexually active. I don't know why we're all going through this really stupid ritual. And I really began to, and around that time, it was the 90s, you also had the killing of affirmative action here in California. You had the 3 strikes, you're outlaw. You had Proposition 187. NAFTA had passed. The internet wasn't born yet. So it was just like a time when, even though we were supposedly a very progressive state, you had some of the most anti-immigrant, anti-Black, anti-Latino legislation brewing. And so that was the macro. And in the micro, you know, I was growing up in Oakland where my friends were being slut-shamed and my friends were were involved in gangs. And yet the narratives in our community were so... They were just so not feeding us. They were also kind of fucking us up, you know? So I think that I began to understand that whoever controls the narrative and whoever creates narrative has a lot of power. And that's why I wanted to become an artist, was because I felt very invisible. I mean, somebody said, like, Selena, I think somebody threw out a Selena reference. And I was just talking earlier how the last major film that had a Latina protagonist is Selena. Wow. And we're 50 million deep in this country, and we are completely invisible to this day. So for me, art is about visibility and also complexity.
One of my favorite posters that you ever made says, "I'm a slut and I vote."
Oh, yes, yes.
Thanks for that, too.
Yes. I love promoting the slut life.
That's right.
Actually, it was so funny because when I sent my initial ideas to Christian, I was gonna have like a big pussy right up there, right in the middle, and it was gonna be beautiful and glowing, and it was gonna just like sing to you when you came in. But then we had to change that idea. But
we gotta talk.
But the reason I really love this whole discussion because I have felt very connected to what everyone has said. But one thing that I want to bring up, and it has a lot to do with being a proud slut, is that I think that as people who face oppression, we sometimes define ourselves by our suffering only, and that we call activism. Activism is it's a struggle. It's like we frame it as a struggle, as suffering, and I think that. And we even have to walk through the show to know that there's a lot of suffering, and that sometimes a lot of the art we make is about suffering, and it's about death, and it's about very harsh things that happen to us. And I also think that we need to be full human beings, and that means that we have to embrace joy, we have to embrace pleasure, we have to experience the full human range of emotions. That's actually why I made that piece, because it says, what does yes look like? Because there's a lot of no. I mean, we're against rent increases, we're against police brutality, we're against violence, we're against war, we're against drones, we're against guns. And we also have to articulate the world we want to see. And I think that that's especially hard when we are hypersexualized, when we are always shown as, you know, one way of being. And I think that as artists, we can tap into that full human emotion, the full range. And unfortunately in our culture, I mean, this is what racism does, is that only white people can be full human beings, and they can fall in love with computers and go out into outer space and get lost in the ocean and fight dragons and figure out their life, and you know, and you never see people of color doing that. And so for me, art is about embracing all of that and embracing everything that I shouldn't, that supposedly I shouldn't be, like I shouldn't be slutty. I shouldn't be talking about pussies when I grew up in this Catholic family that told me to keep my legs closed. So I like being an artist precisely because of that, because it's about complexity.
Yeah, and your work and this piece is so embodied, you know? Like, I was reading the title, Pleasure is Freedom, and I was thinking about some of the people who I collaborate with, and they've told me over and over again, like, I may be in prison, but I'm free because I have X, Y, and Z, whether it's my pleasure, like resiliency, whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
And that, everything you just said, I'm like, that's exactly what I love and appreciate about your work. It's embodied and it reminds us of joy and beauty amongst struggle and resistance and all these things, and the way that our bodies are also capable of pleasure, capable of connection.
Well, it's especially true, you know, Barbara Kruger, the artist, she said, our body is a battleground, and that's so real. I mean, you know, I came out about my abortion in 2012 after being in the closet for 10 years, and it was very critical for me because I understood that the ways in which we connect to our body or we don't, because in a lot of ways, if you grew up as a woman of color, many of my peers have shut down that part because they're hypersexualized and because violence has been a very, you know, it's impacted our communities. But I think that real liberation, we have to remember, I mean, we are the descendants of slaves. We are the descendants of people who have been exploited for their bodies. Like their body has been a natural resource. And women especially, like our body has been a natural resource, even this whole national debate on abortion. It is about like whether or not someone else can tell you to reproduce or not. And so I think that body liberation is a very much core part of our movements. And I am really excited that trans activists have brought forth the question even of eliminating the gender binary, because it means that we begin to question all these things we were told about our bodies. That's actually why it's called Pleasure is Power, because for me, I mean, this was my message. What does yes look like? But also, what does yes look like? Not just like more schools, more green trees, no climate change, etc. But what does yes look like when you're having a lot of orgasm in your life? When you're having, you know, great sex education, or you have health education, and you have the right food so you could experience pleasure. You don't have, you know, food deserts in your community. All of that we have to consider as well. So I really love embodiment. I think that's the next phase of my work. I'm even trying to figure out how to do more like body stuff, because I'm like, you know what I mean? I haven't used my body as much in my work, but I'm a big fan. I just found out about an artist like just a few years ago named Annie Sprinkle, and I was like, wow. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? Like that blew my mind. So
yeah, she was showing her cervix on stage.
Yes, and I think that I feel, especially as a Latina, that all the ways in which all the messages I get of how not to be is precisely what I want to disrupt.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
So do I ask you questions? Okay, cool. Cool, we're going to close it out with Christian.
Yeah. Am I still on?
Yes.
You used your whole 10 minutes, by the way.
Oh, I did? Okay, cool.
I didn't want to listen to you when you said 6 minutes.
Okay. Cool.
Well, you don't have to ask me too many questions. Do you have a pressing question after working with me for this long?
Let's see. So Christian and I really had some. We met just a few years ago, right?
Yeah, just a few years ago.
We really have connected, and I've been, just really super impressed, and just I have really appreciated this show and the complexity of the show. So I guess my first question would be that, you have facilitated conversations with folks like Alicia Garza from Black Lives Matter, or Jeff Chang, and you really are tapping into all of these different movements, whether it's racial justice or evictions. Can you talk about how, as a white woman in your curatorial practice, what are some things that you really think about when you are bringing groups of people together, and how do you, use your privilege to fuck shit up?
Look around you, yeah. I want to hear from a lot of different people. My curatorial background started working in community spaces. I started out after grad school at Pro Arts in Oakland, and working with the community in the East Bay, and it just was the way to work for me. It wasn't as though I had another set of ideas, like I could choose this other path. This was the value system, bringing together as many different voices as possible. I've left the Bay Area and come back a few times, but I've mostly been in the Bay Area most of my life. And I know this place really well, and I've worked in San Francisco a lot, but I've always lived everywhere else in the Bay Area because it's kind of cold here. So I always tend to choose the sunnier spots in the Bay Area in terms of where I've lived. But it's always been very mixed. It's always been a lot of different perspectives. I've always only been working with artists too, and so this is just what I know. And I really care a lot about equity, which I don't think makes me a particularly unique curator, but it's a value system, not just in my work, but in my house and what I want my children to grow up with as well. And so I'm really interested in public expression. I'm interested in public space. A lot of my work is preoccupied with how artists confront violence. And so there is, in this exhibition, a somewhat, I mean, when you get into my essay, it's pretty well articulated, but within the exhibition itself, there's a real commentary about public violence, which is something that I'm very preoccupied with in terms of how artists confront it and how they actually impact change around what's allowed and what's possible. And so when I have the opportunity to write something or when I have the opportunity to work with artists, I want to always go back to those themes. Not necessarily always violence, but it does creep in. It's everywhere all the time. My children had a lockdown today at school. Not a drill, an actual lockdown. And they're 5 and 7 years old. I've always, as somebody who's really engaged in the conversation around gun violence, I've always thought I need to talk to them about lockdown drills. It never occurred to me that they would have an actual lockdown before a drill. And I never really knew when the right time would be to talk to them about it. And today I got this automated call saying that they had locked down the school because there was armed suspects who had been apprehended by the police. There wasn't a ton of information about it. This is how I push back against that, by working with artists that are pushing back against that.
And Christian, tell us something juicy, because I remember there was times when I was calling you and you were like kind of stressed out, and you were like, tell me what was like one of these, what was one of the hardest parts of doing this show? Maybe like something you were not expecting, or you were just like, what the fuck? What were some of the challenges that you ran into?
No, we're not going to talk about this like at a bar somewhere. We're going to talk about it here at the show. While it's being recorded for distribution on social media. The show came together in a very narrow window of time. I actually received the invitation from Deborah Cullinan to start thinking about this show. Deborah is the CEO here at Yerba Buena. And I was invited to start thinking about this show at the end of July. And so there, that was the beginning of thinking about the show, and then hitting the ground running really started to happen in November. And it wasn't so much that it was a negative thing. I think the opportunity to expand the show and to work with more artists than I had initially planned for, that was when there was definitely and also we decided, the new visual arts director, Lucia San Ramon, initiated a conversation about revisiting the architecture of Yerba Buena. So we were revisiting the architecture at the same time that I had the opportunity to expand the exhibition. And so it was a little tense then. It was the holidays too, trying to think about what other kinds of work I wanted to bring into the show. Because I've written about a lot of these artists over the years, but this window of opportunity was that I could bring in artists I wasn't familiar with or hadn't worked with in the past. And so that was probably maybe the crunchiest moment.
And also, I remember when we were talking about the press and the press strategy for the show. What are some of the, I think that sometimes people think activism and they have particular maybe like stereotypes or biases or even in their own narrow vision. What are some, would you say, like, have you noticed have been some of the most surprising reactions, whether it's been by critics or by the press? And also, what have you really tried to communicate outwards when it comes to talking about all this different activism?
So we've had an enormous amount of really amazing press for the exhibition. I actually went on the news to talk about this show on KTVU Channel 2, 4 o'clock Friday afternoon news, live news with Kiba Arnold, which I don't even like to be photographed, so, and people know this about me, and so to put me on the live news was sort of, heart attack making. But it was so exciting to me that night to realize I was on the news talking about the importance of artists in public life. Like, it was a life goal I never even knew I had. And then I was just like, how do I get back on the news? I got to get back on the news. And so, that was a really exciting opportunity. There has been a lot of great press and a lot of support from KQED wrote a wonderful review, Danny Burleson. Sarah Burke, one of my favorite writers in the Bay Area, hands down from the East Bay Express, came very early on to see the exhibition. And there has been some challenging press as well. Some I would say, senior art critics have come in and not understood how this work is art, or not understood how this work fits into the canon, and maybe just kind of missed it in a lot of ways. And that would have been a great opportunity for me to do a walkthrough with them. Generally speaking, I prefer to leave the press alone because I'm also part of the press, and I don't like to be escorted through an exhibition. I like to be left alone as much as possible when I'm looking, and so I've kind of pulled back that way unless somebody has asked me to give them a tour. And so there was a second part to what you asked, but as far as the press goes, the most exciting press for me has been the general interest types of things, like the news, like public media. That's where I write. Those are the kinds of places that I want my writing to be. I don't want my writing in an exclusive art magazine that 8 people read. I want it in a newspaper that millions of people read.
And how do you negotiate that with the fact that there are some people, like what you just explained, that actually have no understanding of the historical nature of our art practices and actually need to be pushed? The art world needs to also be pushed to embrace and understand and study and legitimize this kind of work.
Well, they all pay attention, don't they? So even though there may not be a ton of support for the types of ideas necessarily from the academics or the canon, they were all at the opening. They've all come to see the show. They're all thinking about the work. And the way that I push it is by writing about the work, is by showing the work, and giving artists. With this exhibition, there are 9 site-specific commissions specifically for this show. That's a really unusual number of commissions to undertake in one exhibition that happened in about 6 to 8 months. And so for me, it was not only just that I was showing projects that artists are doing now that are pushing back, but that I was giving them opportunities like you. I heard your comment earlier about wanting to make a giant vagina, and that was a conversation that we had, and I said, that kind of privileges bionormativity. I'm sorry, but you're pushing me to go there. I said, so I want to think like, and during installation, I was on the phone one day and I said, Favianna, by the way, I see that vagina in the middle of your mural there. Don't think I'm not seeing it. It looks like an earring. You see it? You see it now, don't you? And don't think I didn't know there was going to be one turning up. I bet there's more in there that I just haven't seen yet. The thing I want people to take away, which, circling back, I heard I just got my own bell. The thing I want people to take away, this is unusual for an exhibition, an art exhibition. I want people to take away the idea that they have agency, that they can also do the same things that these artists have done in terms of leveraging their own skills or gathering their own community and responding to the things that matter the most to them. And it feels really urgent to me. My essay is called The Fierce Urgency of Now, and I'm borrowing that from President Obama, who borrowed that from Martin Luther King. And because I do feel like right now there is a fierce urgency. We have elections coming up. We have an opportunity to force change that we want to see. And that will not take just a few people working in the ranks. It will actually require all of us. And so I want everyone to see that they can do the things, they can respond to the things that they care about most.
Well, thank you so much, Christian, for bringing us all together.
My radical soup.
Yes. And
Thanks, everybody, for sticking it out. Thank you so much to my artist collaborator friends. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Yerba Buena Center for the Arts.